Is that better?
I think so. Awesome. Welcome back.
I tethered it to my phone. I think my Wi-Fi's playing out. So I've
No, no worries. I can
record.
I can see you and hear you better now.
Okay, good.
How has your day been, Sarah?
Well,
It
it's been
is
okay. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning, so I for me, so I haven't really done that
yeah,
much.
quite early for me, but it's okay.
Yeah. I've got up and done the all normal chores, made my husband a coffee. He normally makes me a coffee, actually, but I made him one this morning. And
I'm
then,
on my third cup already.
oh, good. Yeah. It's probably 5 o'clock, isn't it? Or 6 o'clock where you are.
It's
Right.
at 5 o'clock right now.
Wow.
But I wanted to thank you for coming in and talking about your voice acting career and your journey. I've just recently got into voice acting, and I just love to hear about others and how they got there. And thinking of which, how did you discover your passion for voice acting? And what was that pivotal moment that made you pursue it as a career?
Well, I think as a child, I always played. Me and my friend, we had one of those very old-fashioned tape recording machines, and we always did funny voices, and we used to make us roar with laughter. So we do radio shows, and we do silly characters. We wrote plays, and so it was something that I always did just for fun. And then when I went to university, I did fine art originally, actually, but I did animation. And then there was a girl in my who was a couple of years above me, and she wanted someone to do some voices for her. And because we had the same sense of humor, and I read her script, and she was somebody else was we had a script read through in my house, my shared house. I didn't know her then, and the girl who was in my house was reading, and I could hear she didn't get it, she didn't get the humor. And I said, "Oh, can I have a go?" So I read it, and we were really laughing, and then that was kind of just was a continuation. And then I worked with Candy quite a lot, actually. I mean, I wrote my own stuff as well, but I did a series called Pond Life. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You had it in the States on Oxygen. It's like a little channel that
Don't
you
think I've
had
seen that one.
overseas. Anyway, yeah, so that's how I sort of got started. And it was on Channel 4 here, and I played this character called Dolly, basically. And Dolly Pond, she was called. She was quite fun. So, but I did, before that, we did these very short little animations, kind of cartoons for I think it was for yeah, it was for Channel 4 actually. But we used to record it on a Nagra in my bedroom in my flat. It was all for broadcast, but we did everything was very handmade, basically. It always felt a bit kind of like it's sort of gone back to that in a way. Like people just do stuff in their studios at home, don't they?
Yeah,
So,
it's funny how technology has kind of taken a shift backwards in a sense.
but in a way, it's
So
freeing. I think it's really good. It gives you kind of more creativity, and you kind of
indeed,
get a bit more control, and you're not so frightened of taking risks. I think because I had all that doing stuff in on a very small scale and doing lots of it, when I started going into the studio, I didn't. It just felt very familiar. It just felt something that I'd always done. So I didn't feel. It just felt, kind of like the next thing. If that makes sense.
it
It
does.
didn't feel very unfamiliar. It just felt really like a really familiar space for me. So yeah, so lots of things, but I suppose just that I always think if you really love doing something, try and make a career out of it. Even if you start like it, don't try and start right at the top. Start just where you're having fun, and then it grows from there, basically.
Because if you're not having fun, what's the point?
What's the point? Life's too short. God, you haven't got long here. You might as well enjoy yourself. So I sort of, you know, that's how I feel. So yeah.
When you're voicing multiple characters, how do you mentally and vocally differentiate between them? Are there specific techniques you use to?
Well, to be honest, upon life I did lots of different characters, but basically Mark and Nev, who wrote Peppa, which everybody knows, is huge now. But when they first wrote Peppa, they really liked. I did my natural voice for Dolly, and I did other characters, but they just really liked my normal voice, which actually you can hear. I just sound like Miss Rabbit or silly Nanny Plum. So I've kind of kept my own voice and just done it, and I've been lucky that I've got a cartoony voice that I didn't even realize I had, just my natural voice. So basically, people have always asked me to just do my own voice. So even though I like doing accents and stuff, I don't really get asked to do them very often. They just want me to do my own voice. So, but I mean, the difference between I suppose Miss Rabbit and Nanny Plum. Miss Rabbit is a bit more big sister. Not big sister. She's a bit more school mom and teacherish. She's a bit. I mean, she's sort of a bit she has a go at everything, but she's not that brilliant at anything. I mean, I suppose Nanny Plum's quite similar. I mean, she's just a bit more, got a bit more of a temper. That Miss Rabbit, you would never see that in Miss Rabbit, really. So it's just a different personality, basically. So yeah, it's different. I
Which,
was, people like Morwenna Banks, who does Mummy Pig. She's brilliant at doing loads of accents. She does the French, the woman who, the teacher um, Peppa Pig, and she does loads of other things. So she's kind of really versatile. I always feel a bit of a fraud because I just do me, really. So I feel slightly embarrassed about that. So but I think, look at Brian Blessed. He does the same voice. He does loads of work. So.
how much of your own personality has morphed into the characters? Like, how much of you is in Miss Rabbit or Nanny Plum?
Well, they wrote Nanny Plum for me.
All right.
So yeah, so which was really nice because I was doing Miss Robert and they said, and they kind of liked me doing it and found I always have the kind of comedy role. So I could always be like, whatever it is, like, everything's a bit disastrous or, things go wrong or, they kind of like my timing. But and then when they did, I think Mark had a daughter and he said, oh, actually, I want to write something that's a bit more magical because he said my daughter really likes that kind of stuff. So which is why they wrote Ben and Holly. And then they said, we really want to give you a bigger part, which I was obviously went, yes, please, that's brilliant. So they wrote Nanny Plum as a kind of big character, but they kind of got me to voice all the different characters first, just to see which one suited me. And then it was interesting because Nickelodeon were a bit like, it was quite a while ago, and obviously I was much younger then. And they said, "Oh, she's too young." They were thinking of a woman with grey hair who looked quite old playing Nanny Plum. They said, "No, no, no." So I didn't realise, they didn't tell me. The Nickelodeon came in to watch me voice record, but they didn't. Mark and Evan never told me. They told me afterwards. They just said, "Oh, they're just coming in to watch the voice record." And I said, "Oh, all right then," and just carried on doing what I was doing. But actually, they were checking to see if they agreed with their casting because they had to fight for me a bit actually because I'm not a name really. I'm not, I mean, I'm more now, but I wasn't then. I was kind of just, and even now I'm not really. I don't think of myself as being particularly like a star. Like I just because I don't because it's also I've got other things that I do in my life. I don't just do voice records. I do other stuff. So I sort of
Oh,
think it's like a sort of slight sideline that I do.
tell me
And
more. What else do you do? What is?
I did a series called, which you won't know, but I did sell it. I tell you what, it was oh my God, I forgot my name of them. I had a series called Crapston Villas that was on Channel 4, and that was in the 90s. And I sold it. It was it was on, oh my God, Troma, basically. Do you know Troma? They like used to do really outrageous things and have like
Yes.
they had it, and they used to in America, they used to distribute it and stuff in America on video sales and
Trauma, that was the Toxic Avenger, wasn't it?
yes, that's it, Toxic Avenger. And I met the guy years ago. It was a long time ago anyway. So yeah, they used to, but it was on Channel 4. It was really outrageous actually. And that's how I met Mark and Ev because they stopped doing all the adult stuff in England. And Mark and Ev had done this other series for the BBC, Big Night, and we all shared a studio. And they said, we're going to get into kids because they're not commissioning adult stuff anymore. And I said, oh, after Craps, and obviously Troma took it on. It was really shocking. It was really outrageous. And I said, oh, I'd love to do kids stuff, but I don't think anyone will take me on now. And we were laughing about it. And then eventually they said to me, oh, do you know anyone who wants to write any kids stuff? And I said, oh, I don't know. I'll have a think about it. I only got, there's Candy or there's a few other people. And then he went, no, we mean you. Do you want to write some? I went, oh, yeah, all right. So I started off writing actually at the beginning. And then I moved to just doing the voice record because I was doing, I got into teaching and I was doing other stuff and, kind of, yeah. So basically, and it's just amazing that it carries on. I've been doing it for over 20 years. Just
Awesome.
unbelievable.
How much creative freedom do you have when developing a character's voice? Can you share an instance we had to push back or suggest any changes?
Uh, I can, you sort well, I think when you do a voice, if you do a voice and you've got, it depends who the director is. So if you've got a director who's really particular about what they want and you trust them, then I think you just give them what they want because they know what they want for their project. It's their project. And in a sense, because I've directed, I know how that is. You want somebody to give you what you envisioned that character to say and feel. So I feel if they kind of want me to, I kind of pride myself on being able to give them what they want. if there's a bit more freedom, they want you to be a bit more creative with it, then obviously you instinctively put yourself into it. And I think when they cast you, they kind of know you're going to give them a certain quality, which is why they've cast you. So to a certain extent, some bits, you add something and then, but then sometimes they're sort of like, no, it's definitely got to be like this because that's what we envisage. And then sometimes you'll do something like I'll read through something and Mark and Ev or whatever, whoever's directing now, Jamie Baddington, it's Kilogram Different Company. Sometimes they say, oh, we weren't expecting that, but actually that works better. Or sometimes they go, no, it's not right. We wanted it to be like this because later on this happens. But I'm really naughty because I don't read the scripts before I get in the studio. I just read them cold, which is very naughty.
No, I don't think that's bad at all. That's a really good practice. I think it's you're getting a more raw effect. I think.
More effects. And also you get, I think, sometimes, because sometimes you go down a path and if you prepare too much, then actually you're too stuck on it. You think this is right and you've stuck this to this character. And actually it's better to go in and I look over up as I'm doing it and I see their face and I think, well, they're looking quite happy. That's what they want. So I'll carry on with that. If they're looking a bit sad, then I think I've got it wrong. And I'll try and adjust it. Or I'll say, always, how would you like me to do it? I think you have to be flexible. I don't think you should be too rigid. Because at the end of the day, you're bringing something and so are they. And it's not just, it's a combination of things, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I kind of feel it depends on the project and it depends on who's directing. And, that's just how it is, I think.
What's been your most challenging role so far in your career, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Uh, that's a really hard question because actually I've been very lucky with voice records and I haven't found the work that I've done so far has been that challenging, but I've had other challenges in other areas of my career. So writing or that when I've done things like that, I might have like when I first started writing Peppa, I've got quite a strong distinctive, like I've got a strong distinctive, obviously acting voice. I've got quite a strong distinctive writing style and I had to adapt to the way Peppa's written and there's quite specific rules to it. And to be creative within that, sometimes that's quite difficult because you kind of, it's aimed at a certain age group. So you can't sound too mean or you can't sound, you've got to use a certain type of language because otherwise it's too complicated. So it depends on what it's for. And there was one thing I had to do, actually to tell a lie, there was one thing I had to do which was Pepper, but it was for Hasbro. Oh, I don't know if I should say this actually anyway, because he keeps changing who owns it and who runs it, and they've kept all the same actors, which is brilliant. But they kind of wanted me to do something that I really felt I've been doing it for years, and I know the creatives are really well, and I've written some of it, so I know it. And they wanted me to deliver a line in a way that I felt was a bit mean. And it doesn't go with that character. It doesn't go with Miss Rabbit's character. She's a bit useless, and she's she is, but she's a real let's have a go, even if I get it wrong, which I think is really good for kids because there's no pressure to be perfect. It's a bit like, oh, I got that bit wrong, but hey ho, come on everyone, let's all get on the train, even though I smashed it up or whatever. So there was one line she delivered, and she was a bit nasty she wanted me to say something that was a bit nasty to the kids. And I sort of went, I just think it sounds mean.
Well, I'm glad you weren't mean.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I just said that. But I just thought, well, actually, I was I said, can we deliver it in a slightly nicer way than this kind of slightly? She wanted me to deliver it a bit like that woman out of Devil Wears Prada. I just thought it sounded nasty.
and they were open to the change.
Not that much. I just didn't deliver it. But
Awesome.
I didn't
Peppa
want to do
Pig.
it. Rebellion. But yeah, and they haven't paid me yet. So there we are.
Miss
For that
Rabbit,
bit.
the rebel, the
Yeah.
rebellious rabbit.
So, but I think, the thing is, it was it was in a cinema situation where there's live action kids and they were going to be in it. And she was going to be saying something quite nasty about the way they were walking along and the clothes they were wearing. I thought, what child wants that? They kind of love Miss Rabbit because she's sweet and kind. She's a bit rubbish and she has a go. And even if she gets it wrong, she's still quite jolly. And nobody minds. And kids are in there about sort of 3 and 4, you know, they're kind of really, they're self-conscious, even though they're quite confident. If you sort of said that, they'd be really upset. So I just thought I don't want to do it.
Peppa Pig has become quite iconic in children's entertainment. What does it mean to you to be part of something that resonates so deeply with the children's audiences?
It's honestly, it's a huge privilege. I can't. I mean, I feel I've been so lucky, so lucky to be part of this. I mean, it was, you know, after I finished doing Crapston, which was very adult and very, I mean, you know, kind of teenage, it was aimed at teenagers and early 20s. So you can imagine what it's like, lots of swearing, drinking, and drugs, and you know, it's kind of really over the top. So, which, you know, had a very specific cult audience, which was brilliant, and I loved it, and I was really proud of it. But then to be part of this is something, you know, I kind of wanted. I was in LA, no, I was in San Francisco, staying with a friend, and he was working for Nickelodeon actually, and I said, oh, you know, I really want to get to do voices for like kids stuff, and you know, and I've been doing Pond Life, and I went to see them, and I took my reel in, and I said, I really want to do a big, you know, can I just be part of something? And they were like very corporate, very, we don't want to know you. Who do you think, you know, kind of just that thing where they sort of fob you off by saying, oh, yeah, but you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that. And, you know, your voice is not right for Nickelodeon, and, you know, kind of, you got to get a reel together. Anyway, they said all this stuff that they normally say to everyone, and then that was it. I never heard again. And my friend was working there, so I'd only got a routine because of that. But then when I realized later on, I went back to England and I was working at this studio, Loose Moose, and I was writing some stuff for the BBC, and I was sharing a studio with Mark and Evie do Pepper, and none of us were really doing loads. And they said about this kid series, and I said, "Oh, right." And then I looked, and then it's a massive series on Nickelodeon. And I thought, well, I did it in the end. Really wanted to be in a kid series on Nickelodeon. There I was. I was. So, you know, sometimes things happen when you least expect it. And you know, it's been a huge success, and nobody ever knows. Everyone thinks that that would be a really great thing everyone wants to be part of something massively successful, but you don't actually think it will happen, if that makes sense. So when we all started, there was only me, Mark, Nev, Phil Davis, and Alison Snowden, and they were with the team really. And we had a glass of champagne and went, hooray! And in Mark's house and clunked glasses. Look, here's to Peppa. And I only thought it would be like a season or something, or 2 seasons, and it's just still going. So it's amazing. They just did such a brilliant job with it. So I feel very proud to be part of it.
I love the show. Given the long-term success of the characters that you voice, what do you think are the key factors that contribute to the longevity of a character in children's entertainment? What has kept Miss Rabbit and Nanny Plum going for so many years?
Do you know? I don't know. Actually, that's a really another very hard question. So
I like to keep you on your toes.
yeah, you are keeping me on my toes, right? Well, I don't really know, and I think that's such a hard question because if everybody knew that, I teach animation as well. I work at a university as well. So basically, if everybody knew that thing, which is all everybody wants to know, how do you make a successful show? And you go to conferences, children's media conference in Sheffield, or you have, you know, everybody wants to know how to make a really successful show, you know, and there is actually no formula. You know, do you know Bob the Builder? That was another massive, huge show in England. I think it was all over the place, but that was like, and there was a whole load of shows that then came that were a bit like that. So they had, it's all everyone working together as a team, and kids really like that. I mean, what Mark and Neb did, which was really clever actually, they watched tons and tons and tons of children's telly, and what they did is they wrote down what was missing. And they realized at that point there were loads of shows that were like about, and my character is successful because it's part of a really brilliant show, and I just deliver a comedy bit within that really clever formula. But what they did is they looked at all the stuff that was out there, and they, yeah, like I said, worked out what was missing, and they realized that when it came to Peppa, there were no shows about families. At that point, now they've got Bluey and they've got other ones, but at that point, all the kids' shows were a group of adults all pulling together to make something work. Adults, but with childlike personality, you know, like Bob the Builder or Robots or any of those kind of shows. But in England, for preschool, there were no, I mean, you've got The Simpsons, but that's older. There were no, there were no kids' families really for little ones. So that's what they did. They did a show about a family, and they kind of made it. I think why kids relate to it all over the world is they made it a bit like a soap. So they dealt with little issues. So it might be learning how to ride a bike or falling out with your friend or learning how to take turns. They're very tiny little things to us because we're adults. But to kids, that's huge. That's such a big problem. And so they made a little show, and that's why kids all relate to it because they go, "Oh yeah, I felt like that. I've fallen out with my friend. And I don't know what to do." Or, "Oh yeah, why do we have to take turns when I just want to have a go?" And then they see what a muddle it gets. Or, "I've had to learn to ride my bike and it's been really hard and I felt really funny, but actually I did it." So they kind of deal with lots of little things that kids all kind of deal with. And that's why it's been really successful, I think, because loads of children relate to it and they get obsessed with it, you know.
You said you're a
And
writer. You said you're a writer for Peppa Pig as well.
yeah, I wrote a couple of episodes for them at the beginning. Yeah.
For the writing of Peppa Pig, did you ever consult with any like child psychology psychologists to help with the consultation of what to put out there?
No, it sounds terrible. Neither did Mark and Nev. I mean, it's really, they were very instinctive. So basically, I mean, I sometimes think, when people, anyway, whatever, no, I think I just sort of based it around, I was an auntie at that point. I wasn't a mum then. And I just sort of based it around my niece and nephew a little bit. So what went on at home with them, because I was sort of part of going and seeing them all the time. So the one about the parrot, I remember, because sometimes I'd discuss ideas in the voice record and I wouldn't always write more. Some, but they would maybe use those inspiration. Like I bought my niece and nephew this parrot that copies what you said. And of course, like, hello, hello. And then, of course, they said really rude words and then found it hilarious that the parrot would repeat them back. That's just kids. But they obviously did it not, they were a bit ruder than the Peppa Pig episodes. But so there's things like that. Tell Granny she's a poo, that. And they really roared with laughter because the poo went, yeah, hello, Granny. So, it's sort of like, yeah. So they were based on, and I think that's where a lot of the ideas came from. Like Mark had his own kids and people that were aunties or uncles. So they kind of came from just observational stuff. And also your own childhood. When you write like the learning to ride a bike story. And I wrote that one. I sometimes use that. I've done it with my students because it's a really simple 3-act structure. And you can kind of go through, the setup, the act two, which is always a nightmare. The end of act two, it ends in a situation that seems impossible. And then act three, it's resolved, and it's really simply within 5 minutes. So it's a really clear way of showing how to tell a story. But I base that on learning to ride a bike. Where I remember really clearly my dad holding my saddle and then helping go. I was pedaling around the garden, and then my dad let go, but he didn't tell me. And I was going like this, and I was really confident. As soon as I realised my dad took his hand up, I just fell off because I just thought I can't do it. So that's just a really simple story. And then I put the episode had Daddy Pig, growing a pumpkin, and they had this whole thing about Peppa ends up smashing it up, and there was little bit with, so there was like an A plot and a B plot, but it's really simple. So yeah, so sometimes it's based on your own childhood, and sometimes it's based on observations of your relatives, really, as they're growing up. So that's kind of how it goes. But they did a lot of research just into what was out there, really. And I think the Ben and Holly stuff um, was more about the fact that there were it was they realized that his daughter, like I said, his daughter really was obsessed with princesses and elves and magic, so he made a more magical show, and Mark and Nev did. So yeah, I mean, I've just been, anyway, right.
Over the years, how have you seen the voice acting industry change, particularly in children's programming? Are there any trends that excite or concern you?
I don't know. I mean, I think this trend, interestingly enough, when I first started and I did stuff for Candy, and we just do stuff would you go in my bedroom at home and record it because it was quite quiet. I lived in London, but my room was quite quiet in my flat. And so we just do stuff on an Argo. So I kind of like the idea people have their own studios at home now, I notice. So that's quite good. And I think it means they can get on with, there's a bit more of a sort you know, um, it's kind of grassroots feel to it. So people going back to doing their own thing, which actually I think is really good because quite interesting things come out. I mean, you know, the internet, people say, oh, it's all saturated with stuff and you know, how do you know what's good? But eventually the good stuff does rise through and it means people take more risks. But I sometimes think when it's too top down, you know, and you've got commissioners going, what we want is this and what we want is that, they kind of miss what's happening and what's coming up. And the fact that technically, you know, you can do what you want and you can put it out on the internet and you can do all that stuff. I think it's really brilliant for young people coming up, because how else are you going to get your stuff out there? Because I think commissioners and the broadcast and the industry are often quite nervous, particularly at the moment. I don't think we're living in a financially rich time, whether we're in the UK or whether you're in the States. Things are quite, you know, difficult at the moment. So commissioning editors are far less likely to take risks on new things that they don't know because they've got so much pressure on them to make the buck. You know, you've got to make some money. So they're looking for the next big thing, and actually sometimes the next big thing is coming up in a way that they wouldn't expect. So even though they're going, what we're looking for is this, and you see it when you go to conferences or, you know, when they put out what they want, like new commissioners, what I'm looking for is this. And they often don't really know actually what is. They're just literally what they want is the next big thing and they can make some money and get, and everyone go, oh, aren't you brilliant? You discovered that. And you have to think it's easier now for people to make their own stuff at home and get it out there than it's ever been, actually. And that's really brilliant. I think that's so exciting. So I'm always all for that. Because you know, if you're a stand-up, say, you can go and do stand-up in a club and people can see you. But if you're an animator or a voice artist, you need a product. So actually the fact that you can record at home and do stuff is really brilliant. And I also, the other thing I think is games. I think there's some really interesting opportunities for people in games design. You know, loads of voice people, like actors I know are doing stuff for games design, which is huge. I mean, it's the biggest, I don't know if I'm sure it must be in America as well, but in the UK it's the biggest creative industry money spinner that there is. I mean, we brings in more money than film does in the UK. It's massive. And there's loads of companies, and they're not all based in London. They're all over the place, you know. And so that's a really good route in. And BAFTA now have, you know, like BAFTA, they have like, you know, the TV bit and then they have the film bit, but they have a games design competition, you know, kind of bit as well, which is really good. So you get people, and they within that there are certain categories, and the voice bit is coming up as a category now in terms of winning awards, which I think is brilliant. It's being recognised. So I think games is a really good way of getting in, actually, as into doing a voice. But it's getting in because, like, when I went to see Nickelodeon with my little, I done Pond Life, you know, and they were quite, you know, they were still very much who are you, and they're looking at all the big stars. And I think in America it's harder because you often get really famous people doing voice record work. And in the olden days, you'd have had, like Disney, they had specific voice artists, and they were famous for being a voice artist, not for being an actor. And I think that really cuts it out, cuts a lot of new people coming up. It cuts them out. And I think again, it's because people just want to make sure they get box office numbers and they get people in there. And actually, I don't think that helps new talent, actually. So, you know, I think it's great that they can find other ways of making it, really.
You mentioned gaming. Have you voiced in any games yet?
Yeah, I have. I've done loads of, because it's always embarrassing. That's what I do. But basically, it's because I've got an agent. I've had one recently, and I haven't really bothered because for a long time it was a bit of an accidental career. So I kind of just used to do it and think, oh, great, that's a bit of extra money. But now I thought, you know, actually I'm going to push it and do a bit more. So I'm in a, you know, oddly in a weird position. So I have done some games, but mainly Pepper and Ben and Holly. And it is, you know, it's quite repetitive because you have to go press the button, press the button. Oh, well done. You've done really well, because it was mainly kids stuff. So it's like on phones or, you know, on iPads and stuff. But I think bigger games, I've got a friend who does stuff for Tomb Raider and all those kind of games. And they're like, you know, really big, you know, those kind of, and they're growing. The gaming industry is massive, you know, and there's much more drama around those kind of ones, really. But yeah, no, it's good doing game stuff. I think they're really is, you know, it's another area that's good for people doing voices. I mean, there's also adverts, and I've done adverts and stuff like that, but always in my own voice. Once I did Once I did an advert with this woman called Caroline Aherne. I don't know if you know her. She's really funny. She used to do loads of stuff in the UK, and she's died now. She's really sad. I did an advert with her, and I had to do like a Manchester accent, and I had to be real about this. And then they said you sound too much like Caroline, so I had to change it back to my own voice.
Oh, goodness. What are your thoughts on AI and voice acting? There's been a lot of positive outcomes of it, but do you think there's going to be negative outcomes? I mean, you just type in a script, a tone, and you'll have AI produce the products. Do you feel that that could happen or is happening?
Well, it is happening. I mean, one of my students used an AI voice for their film, but then you know it's what's really hard. Yes, that is an area that is quite frightening. That it's just, but I think that people can just use AI, and at the moment it's not that sophisticated. So the acting's terrible. You can't direct it, so you can't say. And they did it as an experiment. The student I used to sort of they were doing a whole thing about AI and what you can and can't do with it. But you know, if you use an AI voice, it's not directable. You know, if you say read it, say I don't know, I've got something next to me that says I'm going to read that. It's like an advert for records. I don't know why I've got that next to my desk. Anyway, so whatever. So you'll read something out like, hello, how are you? What's your name? But it will go, hello, how are you? What's your name? And you say, no, can you emphasize something else? Like, can you go, hello, how are you? It will go, hello, how are you? You go, no, and it doesn't emphasize it. It doesn't know how to change the emphasis of the word. So it's not that sophisticated yet. So in that way, it's no threat. You can have it to do a really crappy voice that sounds like you've got, when you've got final draft and you get it to read out your script. It sounds like that. It's not that good, but it will get better because this is really early days, and it will get much more sophisticated, and you'll be able to program it to do whatever you want. But there'll always be an element of what's nice about having a voice person in is that there's an element of unpredictability, which you'll never get with AI. So you'll get a director and he'll say, I really want this, and I want it to be just like this. So you go in, and I was just, like I said, I'll read it cold. And then sometimes I'll read it in a way they weren't expecting. And they go, oh, actually, that's much funny. I wasn't thinking of it like that, but actually that really works. You'll never get that with AI because it just isn't incapable of doing that. So, and maybe it will be one day, I don't know, but there's other things, and you can't have, it won't have the discussion, and it won't be able to add certain things. So there will be limitations to it, like everything. But I think it will just add to the melting pot. It's like when photography came about, and everyone went, "That's the end of portraiture," because why do we need to have painting? And of course, paintings developed in a completely different way. Or when they first brought about, video editing and all those kind of things or Photoshop. Everyone can be an artist because we've got Photoshop, but that's not true because it depends who's using it. You have to have an ear, and you have to be able to tell what's good and what isn't good. So I just think it's going to be another tool in the box. And I think, I think it's hard. I think it's very hard for people that do extra work, actually, because I think sometimes they do literally just, I know they photograph people and then they just use them in the background of a scene, which is really, that's quite difficult. But I think, and it is, I mean, who knows where it'll go, but I feel we won't lose it completely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does make sense.
I think for higher end they'll use real people, and maybe like for the crappier, cheaper adverts they'll use it. That's the only thing. But then people can do loads of stuff on their own at home anyway. So I think it will just sort of work into all the other creative tools that we use.
Sometimes when I'm watching TV and I hear the commercials and I hear the copy, I was like, that is definitely AI.
Yeah, you can hear it. You can definitely hear it. It sounds terrible. And if you're a director and you really want to make something good, you want a person because you want to be able to, you don't want to be programming it all in, and you want to be able to have a conversation. And to me, that when I used to direct, the best bit was doing the voice records. I used to love it because you can kind of have a chat with people and you can laugh and you can see if they find it funny. How can you find AI? Oh, you just love it. You'd never get it. Yes, that is very funny. You just wouldn't have that. You said it wouldn't say it like that. It would probably say it in quite a sophisticated way by the time it comes to that. But you just want that human interaction because it makes it at the end of the day, we're telling stories for human beings to enjoy. And obviously to have that human touch, you need humans.
What advice would you give to aspiring voice actors looking to break into the industry? Any common pitfalls they should avoid?
God, that's such a hard one. I think sometimes the most conventional route is sometimes the hardest route. So thinking I'll get my show reel together and I'll send it off to loads of agents because they often they're already trying to find, they're already full of clients who they're trying to find work for. So they kind of can't take anybody else on. I think sometimes doing stuff, yourself. So, like I kind of I suppose, became a voice artist because I was at college with people that were making films, and I said, "Oh, I'll do those voices for you." So someone's just doing student stuff, you know, going somewhere that you respect, like UCA or one of those kind of places where they do animation, and then say, "I'm going to voice stuff," and take also don't go in the studio when you go in the studio and somebody does want to direct you, make sure you listen and give them what they want, and if you and try a few things, make sure that you've got a connection with that person because that's really important. That at the end of the day, that you're another tool basically as a voice. I know that sounds a really weird thing to say, but you're there to give them. They've got you in for a reason because you can give them what they want. So if you don't, then that's really difficult. I think but I don't know. So I think basically just getting yourself out there and, I mean, now there's a trend. When I first started, you did one show reel and it had a bit of everything on it. And I think now what they do is you do like, you'll do a documentary voiceover and you'll do examples of that. Then you'll do a cartoon voiceover and you have all different voices, or you'll do I think it's trying to make yourself get noticed. Like someone did this brilliant, I thought this was such a brilliant thing. They sent this off as their will and they did get an agent really quickly because they did this phone call as if they were phoning up someone who they thought had dumped them and was ghosting them. And they just kept phoning back. It was very short and getting really, really upset and getting really over the top and crying and being really emotional and everything. And then you heard the person phone them back and they'd had to go away for 2 days for something else and it was really embarrassing. So they did it really well, but it was kind of they went through this whole emotional thing and it was quite clever. That's the other thing, is think of something quite clever and do that. But I think don't give up. I think it's have fun with it and find other ways of getting yourself out there because I think you can do that basically. I don't know if that's any help at all. I think you
Sounds
can.
got some fun questions for you. Mrs. Rabbit, busiest rabbit in the world, lots of jobs, careers.
I
How
know.
many has she had? I think I tried to tally it up against like Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin. Even I think she's had more jobs than Barbie.
She probably has. I don't know. I mean, every time I go in, I think, well, what's she doing now? She just basically she does everything but slightly badly. I quite like
I wouldn't say it's badly, but everyone depends on her
very
for
enthusiastic.
everything.
Yeah, and she's very enthusiastic, and she never gets stressed unbelievably. Apart from when she had to look up, there was one episode where they did a quite funny episode because they look at Mum's Net actually sometimes, or Mark and Nebby, so I don't know if Jamie does, and they'd look at what was trending, and they was one point they were going, why is she called Mummy Rabbit some weeks and Miss Rabbit the other weeks? Is she a mummy or is she a miss? And or is she a single mum? And they got really confused. And what they'd done is so then they said, oh, let's have two characters. There could be sisters, Mummy Rabbit and Miss Rabbit. And use the same voice, obviously my voice, my normal my normal voice. So they had Miss Rabbit and Mummy Rabbit. So, and that's the only time Miss Rabbit got stressed is when they had to swap roles because Miss Rabbit had to look after Mummy Rabbit's kids and couldn't cope with them. And Mummy Rabbit had to look after do all the juggling of all the stuff with all the different jobs, whether she was running a keep fit class or, selling ice creams or flying a helicopter or whatever it was. So that's the only time she ever got stressed when they had to swap roles. But yeah, most of the time I literally can't remember how many jobs she's got.
If Miss Rabbit had a day off, if that ever happens, what would she do to relax?
I don't think she could. I don't think she could. She's one of those workaholics. She'd set her, so she'd start, and then she'd suddenly become a job. Whatever it was, she'd be cleaning and then she'd have to. Or she'd go somewhere and she'd have to take over. Or she'd have a day off and then the fire alarm would go and she'd have to go back and sort out, fire. She'd be like, trying to sort out what was going on. So I don't think she'd ever have a day off. I think she'd turn everything into a job.
If you could use one of Nanny Plum's spells in real life, which one
Oh
would
my
you choose and why?
Oh my God, that's such a hard question. Well, I don't know actually. I mean, Nanny Plum, that's such a hard, I mean, that's such a difficult question. And obviously there's all those classic ones like never aging, but then I think, oh no, if you never age and then you got to like 80 and all your friends had died, why would you really want to be young? It was depressing. You don't have anything in common with anyone. So that would be really crap. So I wouldn't want that. And then you think, well, I'd think good health for most, but then if you had good health for your whole life, it's really hard. I think to have, I really don't know. I don't know. To have everyone in my family to be happy. That's the main thing.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah. That sounds a bit of a cop out, but yeah, no, that's it really.
No,
I
not a
think it's
cop out
quite,
at all.
actually, do you think, what would I like for me? What would I like my life to be if I had every option? I think it's quite hard. I'm sort of quite happy really, but obviously you want, think, oh, a bit more money would be helpful, or, there's all those things, but really, I'm all right, really. I'm quite easily pleased, I think.
Have you ever surprised someone with your character voices in a public setting? How did they react?
Yeah, well, because it's my voice, I get spotted all the time. It's really weird. Like I've had it when my daughter was little, used to take her to ballet. And eventually the woman who runs the class, and my daughter was quite nervous and she wouldn't go in. The ballet teacher used to have to hold my daughter's hand and she'd have to stand next to the ballet teacher because Minnie somehow decided she wanted to be the teacher. She was about 3. Anyway, eventually this woman said to me, "Oh, I'm not being rude, but you really sound like Nanny Plum." And I said, "I am Nanny Plum." And she went, "No, you're not." I said, I am. And she just wouldn't have it. And eventually she did believe me. She said, "But God, you live up here in Preston." I went, "I know, it's amazing." I think they just thought I'd be living somewhere else. And I've had it in supermarkets when I've been calling Minnie or I'm going, oh, darling, what should we have? Whatever, talking about something. Um, and I've seen kids really look at me. And also when I've sworn actually, which is really oh effing hell. What about no, I look, they go, Miss Rabbit's here. And I think, oh, I must do that in public. So yeah, so that's really awkward. So yeah, so I do get spotted mainly by kids really and by parents that will say, "Oh my God, you sound just like Miss Rabbit," and then me, "Oh, Nanny Plum," and then I have to say, "Well, you know,
That's
I am."
me.
Yeah. It's quite nice actually. I think Danny Pig gets it as well. Richard Ridings, he just does his voice. I see he's an actor. I see him in quite a few films sometimes, but he scores. And I always say to Minnie, "Listen to that voice. Who's that?" And she goes, "Oh, it's Danny Pig." So yeah, he does the same voice as his character, and his is very distinctive as well.
If Miss Rabbit and Nanny Plum were to switch places for a day, how do you think they would fare in each other's worlds?
Wow, I think Nanny Plum would probably have quite a good time in Peppa Pig's world because she could just do magic, even though she's also a bit gets things wrong a bit. She could just magic things, and it would be much easier. So she could just magic a helicopter or magic a train, or she could sort things out. I think Miss Rabbit, have to hang out with the elves because she's not very magical, basically. So she'd struggle in the fairy kingdom. She'd be much more akin to the elves really because they like working hard and not and don't believe in magic. So I think she'd probably have to swap sides.
What's the funniest or most unexpected thing that's ever happened to you while recording in the studio?
I don't know actually. Let me have a think. I don't know. That's really hard. I mean, sometimes I've done adverts where I think they've only got me in because kids like me, and then they all get. I have to do like a bit of recording for them specifically. And I didn't, I made a real mistake by doing this because they really wanted me to do the advert, right? So that was really good. And I got paid to go to the audition. I was thinking, oh, great, I've obviously got this job. And then they all went, I really, so glad to meet you. I'm so love Nanny Plum, really love Nanny Plum. Can you just say something for my 5-year-old? I'm like, okay. And I went, hello. And I said, hello, George. Hope you're having a really lovely day. Bing, bang, bong. Jesus, I made some sort of silly spell up. And then, basically the next person went, oh, actually, can you do something for my 5-year-old? So then I kept adding. So I didn't, what I should have done is written it down and done the same for all of them. And I think the person who originally asked me was the person who wanted me in. And then I gave everyone else slightly, without meaning to, everyone else slightly longer spells and slightly more detail. So then I lost that job basically.
Oh.
So that was, I didn't handle it very well. I should have done the same for all of them. Anyway, that's just how it goes. They all got a free voice record. Well, they didn't actually. They didn't have to pay me to go down, but they didn't. They all got up, whatever.
Do you record from a home studio or do you go to,
Yeah. I
say
go
again?
to London. I go
Okay.
to London. When it was COVID, I used to go to Manchester because I live nearer to Manchester. I'm about an hour from Manchester. Well, actually, if it's there's no traffic, it's like 20, 30 minutes. So, so in COVID, I used to drive to Manchester and be in this little studio on my own, and they'd link me in via the internet, and I'd do it as kind of with a Zoom call. But it was a recording studio, but based in Media City in Manchester because it was I could drive. Whereas London for me to drive is about 5 hours, so I normally get the train, and I can do it in a day. And I go down. And I've been using the same studio, same voice record studio for 20 years. I've been going to Gosford Street, and it's really nice in there. So yeah, so I go there and go in the studio. So for me, I really like that. I find it easier.
Awesome. If you could create a brand new character for a show, what would that character be like and what kind of voice would you give it?
Well, I'd like to, do you know what I'd really like to do? I'd like to do a girl, a character. I'd like to do a girl, and she's this kind of teenager. So she's kind of at that age where you're just starting secondary school. I don't know what you call it. I think you have a different system. You do have a different system in America. So when you're about 12 or 13 and you're just growing up, so you're becoming, like just basically in between, really. So you're kind of not you're a child, but you're not a proper teenager. You're kind of in that middle bit, which I think is quite difficult. And I kind of I'd like to do a girl who's quite feisty and she's not conventional and she's all the things like you're not supposed to be. And, she's quite funny and she's clever, but she's kind of alternative. And I'd really like that because I think there are lots of girls out there and they go from having Barbie or, the what's that horse one? There's one mice pony, and then they go to like kind of what is there? And the boys seem to have loads more options. And I kind of feel, where's the girl's story that's like that? There should be like a girl who's that age group, and I'd like her to be, just outspoken and funny and tell all those stories and all that stuff that girls, I think, of that age have to go through. And they kind of broadcasters always go, I know, but girls don't really watch cartoons at that age. They tend to go for, kind of romantic things, or they go for, kind of much younger. And I think, yeah, because there's nothing out there for them. They would watch it if they had something, because there isn't, and I always think things like, The Simpsons is great, and so is Family Guy, but they're quite blokey. It's all basically Homer's the funny character, and Marge is just like helping him, sorting him out, and making everything better. And the kids Bart's the funny one, and Lisa's really hard working, but she's not. I mean, it's a great show without a doubt. It's really funny, and Family Guy's sort of similar format. You got the mummy sorts everything out, and the daddy's a bit useless. So I kind of think it'd be quite nice to have a funny girl who's just kind of dealing with all the stuff that age group have to deal with, particularly now. So yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
If
There
you
you
could
go.
voice a character alongside any other voice actor, living or past, who would it be and why?
God, that's a really hard question. Uh, I don't really know. I mean, I think I'm lucky. I work with people like Rowena Banks, who I think is brilliant. She's so talented. So I feel I'm very privileged to work with her. I mean, it's I've only, I think in terms of American ones, I don't really know. I kind of look at all the old stars that used to be, the Disney characters, that kind of played like that did they. If you look at them, and I literally can't remember their names off the top of my head, like you look at the Jungle Book, and you look at all those ones in the 60s and 70s, and they had all those classic voice artists that did lots of different Disney films at that point. I'd love to have met that lot because I just think they were iconic really, and that's what they did, and they were happy doing that. So I kind of feel that is quite good. Um, so yeah, Tracy Ullman, I think she's brilliant. Remember Tracy Ullman? Do you cover
Yeah,
Tracy Ullman?
yeah,
She
Trace Ullman.
introduced
She's one that brought The Simpsons to life
yeah,
in a
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I really think she's brilliant. She's so versatile, and she's really funny. So her, I mean, there's lots of people. It's really hard. I'm really prepared, so I'm like going, oh God, but yeah. So that's that. Yeah, there's lots of people, but I can't. Yeah.
This next question is from my daughter. I asked her if you could ask Miss Rabbit any question, what would it be? And she said, "Why does all the characters in Miss and Peppa Pig fall down to the ground when they laugh?"
I don't know. I just because it's funny. That's
It
all.
is funny.
Do you find how old your daughter?
She just turned 6 just a couple weeks ago, and
So
she's
sweet.
a huge fan of Peppa Pig ever since well, she could turn on the TV.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's sweet. And it's funny, isn't it? But because when they first wrote it, and they all went and they run jumping muddy puddles, and then they fall down laughing, which was really sweet. I kind of like this image of it. And but then when I had my little girl, who's now 16, she's a grown up. But when she was that age, I'd sort of walk her to the voice. Sometimes she'd come to the voice recorder with me, and she'd sit in the studio outside, and we'd go past the muddy puddle, and I'd think, oh no, like jumping in it, she'd be covered. And I'm going, no, not in those shoes. It made no difference. And I did think, oh, God, that's serious. Why did they put that in? But it is brilliant. The kids love it. But yeah, I had a phase where I used to dread walking along in the rain, or after it had rained and there were loads of puddles everywhere. She'd want to go in every single puddle.
Yeah, it's because of that bit. My daughter has every time she sees a puddle, runs to it and starts jumping and singing the song every time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They grow out of it. But it is a phase where you think, oh, anyway, but it's very sweet. It's a really sweet show.
Balancing work life, as someone who voices beloved characters, how do you balance the demands of your career with your personal life? Has your work influenced your personal experiences in unexpected ways?
Yeah, I think that is a really hard question. I mean, when I at one point I was doing Peppa, I Peppa and Ben and Holly back to front, and I was back to back, and it was really busy. So I was going down literally every other week to just do voice record. So it was really manic. And I live in Preston. It's 2 hours on the train to London, but you can do it in a day. But it got to the stage where I was staying because I lived in London for years before I moved up here. So I've got loads of friends and family. So I just stayed with people, and then I'd be there for 2 days. And then I was pregnant. So then I just carried on doing it till I got to about I think I must have been about 7 months pregnant. And I got to that really tired phase. So I couldn't be bothered to do it. And I was in the voice, I had no energy at all. And I saw their faces and everything. And they were really worried that was going to be the end of me. Because I just couldn't be bothered to deliver. So then we had time out. Obviously, I had my baby, and then 3 months after that, they said, "Oh, I think it's time for you to come back. We've got lots of stuff for you to do." So I used to take Minnie with me on the train because she was only a baby, and then I'd feed her before I went into the voice call, so she'd sleep, and we'd do 2 hours, and then I could feed her again. But I had a whole load of friends that would and sometimes the production manager who I knew from uni, she would just take Minnie out and walk around the park, push her around the park. But it was kind of fun because she became kind of part of that whole process. So she was there. And she does a voice. She did Baby Alexander crying. So that has had but most of the time it's fine because I kind of fit it in around everybody and everything else. So I work at a uni as well, and I do bits of writing. So I kind of just, my husband's creative. He makes ceramics, so we kind of both do creative things. So we kind of just give each other the space to do those things and support. So sometimes he'll be at home and he'll do the childcare more, when she got older, because if I had to stay for longer, or so we kind of balance it like that. It works. it's fine. So, but I think it's important. I really wanted my family to be part of everything and not to feel I was going off and doing something and then coming back. I always made sure that they always felt part of everything.
Of all the characters you've voiced, do you have a personal favorite or one that you feel most connected to? What makes that character special to you?
That's again another hard question because obviously I do Ben and Peppa and blimey, Miss Rabbit and Nanny Plum are hugely well known all over the place. So they're my favourites because of that. But I did a character called Dolly Pond, and she was my favourite character. She really was written. My friend Candy and I are really close, and she's the person I met when I was at uni. And when I was this girl was voicing this thing. Shall I read it? And I read it because I knew how it should be delivered. I knew where the comedy was. And so that character Dolly is partly based on me and partly based on her, and it's a really great character. You know, it's called Pond Life because she feels trapped. She's like in her 20s and she feels trapped by her life. So it's not magical or anything, but it kind of we relate to it more. So she's kind of got a boyfriend that she still doesn't really get like anymore, but she's like her friend and they hang out together. But she doesn't really ever go out with him, and he's slightly obsessed with her, but she's not that bothered about him. Her mum and dad live around the corner, and she's got a sister who's had a family, and she always feels inadequate because she hasn't done that yet. She's always in a dead end job. She works in a crappy shop with Mrs. Allright, who's like that, talks like that with his very, very low Welsh voice. So she's Mrs. and Mrs. Allright, and then basically Dolly is always moaning to Mrs. Allright. She's going to have a different life. She's not going to stay. And then she has, and whatever she does, she has her best friend who, and then she has this, so it's a very small little pond of world that she's always trying to break out of, but she never really does. She ends up because she quite likes her family really, but she moans about them quite a lot. And it's funny. There's lots of commuting where she tries to go and get a job somewhere else, and she just doesn't manage it. That she tries to get a thing about this boy. She has a boyfriend. Another boyfriend turns out wrong. She goes traveling, gets really fat, and basically, and then so she it's kind of good. It's funny. And I think that's the one that I feel I have really fond memories, even though it's not as well known as the others. It's really well written. It's really good, actually.
Being a voice actor, it's good to have a bunch of accents in your tool belt. Is there an accent that you've had trouble with that you're just not particularly have a strength in? Which accent would that be?
That's such a hard because I don't really do. I mean, I do accents, but only if I'm asked. I don't really do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think American accents because they're not so familiar with. Even though we have loads of American shows on telly, I'm not that familiar with all the nuances of all the different American accents. So you've got Southern states, you've got New York, you've got West Coast. That I'm not that familiar. Whereas in England, it's much smaller. We've got loads of accents. So like Lancashire is really rounded like that place, and it's very where I come from up here, and it's here and there, and it's all very like that. And then you've got, Northern Ireland, which is just over the border and over the river, over the sea, and that's much more a kind of, so I don't really, I mean, I often don't get to ask to do them, which is a bit of a shame, And then you've got Lance, and it's all like that, like my nephew, yeah, it's all like that, and I've got a bit blunted, it's, he's a, and then, he's got terribly posh, and so, I mean, I think English accents I kind of don't worry about as much. But I do American ones I'm not very familiar with because I just don't hear them in the same way every single day. And I think if you hear an accent all the time, you can learn it. But I think, even though I've been to America quite a few times, I've not been there for a long period of time, if that makes sense. So I haven't been there for months. I've gone out and I'm there for a month or something, or whatever. But I used to go quite a bit to the West Coast, well, to LA and San Francisco, but I haven't been for ages actually. My daughter's she's on a school trip to Houston soon. She's really excited. She's
That's
going
where
to
I'm from,
Houston.
is the Houston area. She'll love it. It's really
Oh,
hot.
are you?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, she's going to the Houston Space Center.
Okay,
And
yeah.
she's really excited, yeah.
I just lived a couple miles down from there.
Oh, really? Oh my God. I'm going to meet a real American and I'm going to get a cowboy hat. So I'm having a real cowboy hat. I mean, well, good for you. She's really excited.
That's funny. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you're currently working on? Any current projects that you'd like to share?
I've written a paper. This is more academic though. I've written a paper which is like an academic paper about some drawings I found in the Preston Lancashire archives. So they're kind of based around a historical event. They were drawn at that time. So I've been animating them and trying to make them into a little film. So I've written a paper about that and I'm trying to get some money together to make the film. I've done a pilot. I need to make it a bit longer, so I'm doing that. And I've recently got a literary agent because I've the character that I was telling you about, and I didn't say too much, but I've written I'm writing a book a bit for that age group because I think sometimes it's easier to write it as a book and then take it to a broadcaster than it is to take it as a pitch Bible, really. So I'm doing that. So I've got a couple of projects on the go that I'm doing. So
That is awesome. Can't wait to check them out.
will be ages because everything takes ages. Let's face it.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Okay, thank you, Johnny.